From Chicago, this is Bruce DuMont with our Beyond the Beltway analysis of national politics, featuring occasional injections of rumor and innuendo, all offered up by our panel of political insiders, pundits, power brokers, public servants, professors, and most importantly, plain-speaking Americans from coast to coast. Tonight featuring commentary by Richard Boykin, Kristen McQuarrie, Dan Miller, and Carlos Ponce. Our program tonight coming to you from our home base at the Museum of Broadcast Communications in Chicago. Nice to have you with us. No phone calls tonight. We are recorded, and we are talking to our Chicagoland audience, because we're going to be talking about the big news of this week, at least in this city, and that is that there's going to be a runoff for the first time in the history of Chicago. There's going to be a runoff for mayor of the city of Chicago. There's going to be ward races in 19 wards. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the broadcast. And I would say that the political world is kind of focused on Chicago and what is happening here in this city. And we're going to be talking about the significance of that. If you have comments about this program, you can always go to our website, Bruce DuMont at museum.tv, or send us an email. Or if you want to tweet us with a comment, it gets at Dumo, at D-U-M-O. But tonight, we are talking about Chicago politics, and it was quite a night on Tuesday night. It was surprising to many that there's going to be a runoff. Chuy Garcia, the county commissioner, a former alderman, former state senator, he pushed Rahm Emanuel to a runoff. Kristen McQuarrie, nice to have you with us, editorial board member of the Chicago Tribune. And one of your first pieces that you wrote after that was the first several paragraphs were exactly what was going through my mind as I was out. At the Alhambra Palace on the west side, and I experienced the same thing that I think you did, but I'll let you share it with the audience first.
Well, just watching the acceptance speech that Chuy gave the night of the election, he's a new man. I think during the campaign he was very halting. He wanted to stay on message. That's what Rahm Emanuel does, as we know. He never gets off message, and I think Chuy Garcia was kind of that mold. We saw him sort of blossom that night on stage. This is a big deal to be holding Rahm Emanuel to a runoff, and so it was a big victory for him, and I think Rahm Emanuel should be very nervous.
That's a good
Dan Miller,
because Chuy grew in that job from the get-go. When he made a presentation at the City Club of Chicago, it was not a disaster, but it was awful. It was one paragraph. He started at the beginning and ran to the end. He didn't even stop for applause. He was on Beyond the Beltway, the TV version, when Bruce was on on vacation, and once again he was starting to grow a little bit. He's a little bit more assertive, but nowhere near the man we saw on election night.
Carlos Ponce joins us. Carlos?
I think that we were all getting the same sort of reaction, because I too saw him at the City Club, and I think that night, at election night, Chuy Garcia was beginning to really believe that he could be mayor. And he came up with enthusiasm and was able to really charge up an audience that was ready for him. And I think now he's going to be a much more formidable candidate.
Richard Boykin, county commissioner, joins us. You're Chuy Garcia's seatmate on the county board.
That is correct, and I'm proud of Commissioner Garcia and the work that he's been able to do on the Cook County board and throughout the years and his experience.
Did you see this coming?
Yes.
But you were for who in the primary?
Well, I supported Dr. Willie Wilson.
Okay.
He got 11% of the vote. And so I would say that not only did Chuy Garcia force the mayor into a runoff, but it was the other folks like Dr. Willie Wilson, Alderman Bob Fioretti, and Doc Walls. So I think that all of them, the combination, held the mayor to 45% of the vote. And
why do you think, this is an open question for everyone, we'll start with Christian, why is it that Rahm was unable to close the deal with all of the money advantage that he had, the incumbency, everything that he had going for him, the President of the United States coming in, the National Park, the Pullman, everything. He had everything going for him. What do you think what's the deficiency there?
Two things. Number one, he did make some tough decisions. He did close 50 schools in the city, and that was hugely emotional, especially in the African-American community, and that's where he lost support on Tuesday night. The other issue is his personality. People do not like him. And so even though I think a lot of voters wanted to send him a signal and force him into a runoff for that reason, I think many of them will come around during the April election.
Those two things, though, you can't undo the things you've just mentioned. Do you agree with that, Dan?
I
You
disagree.
can't suddenly become lovable. You can't suddenly have people forget, no, I didn't close 50 schools. How does he do it?
That is something that he's not going to be able to overcome, and he shouldn't overcome. I would like to see him become more Rahm-like. Chris and I disagree that he's made tough decisions. The only tough one he made was the schools, which was a horrible political decision. But what else? We've still got a gargantuan
You make
deficit.
a horrible political decision, and you get 45% of the vote.
But it isn't as if Emmanuel went through a series of really tough decisions and got battered on each one, because he didn't. We still have an enormous deficit in next year's budget. We have a $20 billion unfunded pension liability. We've got a $500 million balloon payment due to the police and fire. He hasn't made those decisions, and he hasn't put forward a program to overcome them.
Carlos, what are your thoughts on that?
My thought was that I think in large measure it wasn't so much that he was making a decision to close the schools. It's how he made that decision.
Right.
He said he was going to have a citizens group that was going to make recommendations, and then he totally preempted them. So he's telling the community, hey, I'm not really listening.
But what does he do? What does he do between now and April? What does he do to change those basics? That's history.
Yeah,
Richard?
look, I think Kristen's right, and I think she hit the nail on the head. I think he lost the African American community, and the results show that. I mean, closing of the 50 schools, the crime problem in Chicago,
What
10,000
does he
shootings.
do now? Again, what I'm saying is that's a decision that is absolutely locked in granite. So is his personality at the moment.
Well, I think
although that could conceivably change, but what else can he do to get the people that either didn't show up, or which is a lot?
Well, 66%
I
of
know.
the people didn't
How
vote.
do you inspire them now?
Well, I think he's beginning to do it. Like, he's been out at the train stations in the morning and in the evening.
Yeah, but
And he's been
I
meeting
think he has
with
to
folks.
show that he's the more competent candidate.
Yeah.
And while I completely agree with you, as the Tribune editorial board has written, and I have, he didn't go far enough on pensions and all these other issues. But he did get a tiny bit of pension reform with municipal and laborers. He did cut back on retiree health care costs. That went to federal court. He did close schools. He has done more than previous administrations in trying to close the gap. He has slowed down the expansion of TIF districts. If you care about, the previous mayor papered the city with TIF districts.
What
We're
about
not
the
seeing.
violence, though?
So I'm
He
just saying,
hasn't dealt with the
financially,
violence.
in terms of getting the city back in line, he does have a record there. Is it powerful? Is it revolutionary? No. But he has something, and I think going forward he has to prove that he's the person that's going to do that.
Would you agree, though, that the people that are really into this subject, they're really astute. They can talk about TIF districts. They can talk about all kinds of other tax-related stuff. As you talked about when you were sitting in for me for several weeks, you talked a lot about finances. Okay. It seems to me that if you are that much in tune with politics and the future of the city, you cared enough to come out of your house and vote on Tuesday. The people that didn't vote, that's 66% of the people that didn't vote, I'm not so sure that they're going to be turned on by his position on TIF districts or his position on anything related to the finances of the city. You even talked about it in your column. They may be looking for fairy dust. They're not necessarily looking for the hard decisions, and I just don't think people vote for people they don't like. They can vote for people they disagree with politically. If they don't like them,
Look, he can.
I think that's going to be. I want to get everybody's reaction. That we got to go to a break. Mm-hmm. But how do we deal with the likability aspect of Rahm Emanuel, and can it be changed in the next 6 weeks? Back shortly from Chicago. Bruce DuMont back. Thanks very much for joining us on this recorded edition of Beyond the Beltway. The question that we posed before the break was, is there anything personality-wise, and also I want to expand it, any other political things that the mayor can do between now and April? Carlos, what about you?
I think that what's really happened is that the Chuy Garcia candidacy is historic and has moved the mayor to have to do some things that he might not have to do had he just won outright. Like, for example, whatever was being promised or the expectations were in the Hispanic and the black community have now been upped. Because now what was his first appointment the day after the election? he went to see candidate Willie Wilson. He needs to reach out, and all the promises that may have been made before, they're all going to be changed in one way or the other.
Is Willie Wilson at this moment in time, is he absolutely in the Chuy Garcia camp in your view?
Well, I think that Dr. Wilson is going to look at it. He's going to weigh his options. He got 48,000 votes.
What would you recommend to him?
I'd recommend to him my recommendation would be for him to support Commissioner Garcia. I mean, look, Commissioner Garcia is going to stand for reform of or ending red light cameras. He's going to stand for investment in the south and west sides of Chicago, in all of Chicago. He's going to bring Chicago together. Before
the election, someone who I respect said that if Chuy Garcia gets into the runoff, the financial playing field is going to be pretty leveled, because you're going to have outside money coming in, you're going to have union money coming in. It's going to be the only big race in this year, and they're going to put the type of effort behind Chuy Garcia that they put behind Scott Walker when it was the only game in town. Does everybody agree that that's likely to happen? That Chuy, I mean, based the other night, I mean, when Chuy was giving his acceptance speech, I mean, he rattled off at least 15 unions. I mean, he was thanking everybody. So I'm not, and move on, and move on.org. Well, we don't know. Probably might be slightly, Dan. Probably is, but again.
But he's not beholden to the 1%, though. He's beholden to the 99%, not the 1%. Right. That this
the unions love Emanuel too, and I think the unions, we like to think that they go behind the ideology of the candidate, but really they're going to go with who they think the winner is going to be, so that they're on the right side of that the day after the election. And Emanuel has a lead in that category. So,
and Chuy, do you think Chuy is going to raise $9 million and
No.
have a separate PAC?
No, he's running to the left of Emanuel. So the people who would want to take down Rahm Emanuel are people to the right of the mayor nationally. If this is going to turn into more of a national race, they're not going to be giving money to Chuy.
Well, the other thing, go ahead.
I was going to say, and Chuy is going to try to make every Rahm commercial a reminder to people that it is the big money that is supporting him, as opposed to him who is a man of the people.
Right. Well, the other night, again, we talked about it at the beginning. I mean, it was having been at Harold Washington's primary and election night victory back in 1983, when I went over to the victory party for Chuy Garcia the other night. I can tell you just personally, and I've covered a lot of victory parties, the electricity was very similar to what I experienced with Harold Washington. The big difference, obviously, was that in 1983, it was a black, brown, and liberal white group that put it together. And the change here is that the vast majority of the people there were Hispanic. There was a goodly number of African Americans. I had a good conversation with Jonathan Jackson, who believes that Chuy Garcia can be the next mayor of Chicago, and obviously a heavy smattering of union and white voters as well, white liberal voters or white union voters. Mm-hmm. So the dynamic was there. And what you saw, as was referenced by Kristen, you saw a fiery side of Chuy Garcia. And let's take a listen to a portion of his comments the other night after his victory in at least getting into the primary runoff against Rahm Emanuel. Let's take a look.
Today, a majority of the people said with one loud voice, we're sick and tired of being sick and tired. We're going to build a new Chicago, a Chicago that works for everyone.
There was a revival aspect of it, and again, the other thing that you remember from that 1983 race, you saw the blue and white Harold Washington signs all over. I mean, the signs and Punch 10 and the buttons that were everywhere. And again, I'm not suggesting that you're going to see them necessarily on the street, but they already had the buttons. The April 7th Chicago is Chuy country. That's a button I think that you're going to see a lot, and I think you're going to see Rahm Emanuel's buttons out there as well. You're going to certainly see him a lot more on television, but it's the difference between the sound and the spirit of a movement and a visceral response to a candidate versus more of a sedate reaction that Mayor Emanuel got. I mean, his friends are people that write big checks to him.
That's right.
But again, that passion of people that Chewy had is it was different. It was discernibly different.
It was, and I mean, you can't discount the fact that it was a big night for the Chicago Teachers Union.
Yes.
Not only did they mobilized and got the elected school board question in 37 wards where they had to collect signatures to do that. That takes an enormous amount of commitment. They had 5 members who were running for city council. 3 of them forced incumbents into runoffs. And they got Chewy. So if they can maintain that momentum, and I think that's what Rahm is afraid of, he's in some trouble.
At the end of last year, I think it was either last year or the year before, I think it was the last year, when you were on this program, Dan, you made a prediction. And one of the, I think it was like, who was someone to watch out for and fear on the national scene? And you said, everyone else was talking about national figures at that time. And do you remember what you said?
Remind me.
Bill de Blasio of New York.
Yes, yes.
So do we have the makings of a de Blasio administration if Chewy Garcia gets elected?
I definitely think so. They both come from a very progressive, liberal, left-wing approach to public policy issues, taxation, and social services. Very definitely. What Garcia has to do is maintain that momentum, that energetic, high-energy momentum that we all saw on election night. Mm-hmm. If he can do that, yeah, he can easily be certainly more popular than de Blasio is right now in New York.
Richard Boykin.
Well, you know, the election is going to be 2 days after Easter, and it's almost like a rebirth, if you will, and a resurrection. And so it's a historic point, and that Sunday before the election, everybody's going to want to be in black churches. I believe the African-American vote is going to play a pivotal role in determining who this next mayor is going to be.
Can the African-American community get as excited about his Hispanic as they would about a black candidate? I mean, that's part of it.
Look, I absolutely believe so. I mean, I think the Hispanic community was excited about electing the first black president in 2008, and they got behind President Obama. I think here's an opportunity to elect the first Hispanic mayor of Chicago. And I think we'll get excited about it.
I think there's another political sort of a national dynamic is you've got, obviously we know what's going on with Scott Walker's presidential aspirations, people looking at Wisconsin, the right to work battles up there, this business versus labor in Chicago. I mean, there will be a lot of national exposure for this particular campaign, and I just think that it's going to get again, everybody's going to throw everything they possibly can at each other to win this race. It means an awful lot.
Are you suggesting that it'll be a dirty campaign?
I don't think from Chewy Garcia's point
I don't think it'll be a dirty.
One of them would dare.
By the way, the other thing, we were talking about Rahm's personality. We talked about what Rahm can do. And I would say that, as longtime listeners might know, Rahm Emanuel used to be a regular guest on this program, or when it was called Inside Politics, was on for almost, 5 or 7 years as a regular guest, wanting to be on the air, and it was when he was doing fundraising for Mayor Daley. And I will tell you, Rahm Emanuel is one of the funniest people I've ever met. And something happened to Rahm when he was elected and he went to the White House. He got so serious and so, had to prove, how tough he was. But, if he was sitting around a table, I mean, you'd be cracking jokes with this guy. I mean, he was absolutely funny. He was an enjoyable, pleasant personality. He was a very popular guest when we used to have him in discussions just like this. I wish he would come out of his shell and give us a little bit of the old Rahm. It might make him a little more likable, because
on
Chewy is absolutely likable.
On election night, he was very gracious. When he first mentioned Chewy Garcia, and portions of his audience started to boo, he stopped them and said, no, Chewy's a very nice man, he's a good man, et cetera, and perhaps that was a little glimpse into the Rahm Emanuel that you're talking
about.
Here's
my point. No, I disagree with you.
Okay.
He wasn't funny. I'm talking about funny.
Oh,
he
funny.
wasn't likable. And there wasn't a person in that room that didn't in their own mind say, he has to say this because the cameras are rolling. He doesn't really feel that way, because he's just probably poured several $1 million into opposition research on Chewy Garcia, and they're going to know what Chewy Garcia had for lunch when he was 18 years old. I mean, that's his expertise, Oppo research.
Well, right. So on that point, all he's gotten on Chewy Garcia so far, which I think is interesting, is this one vote that Chewy Garcia cast in the 1980s for a property tax hike, which the mayor, too, has proposed a property tax. So if that's the extent of the Oppo research, he's in trouble. The other thing is,
He'll do more.
What?
Now he needs it more, but go ahead.
Now he needs it more. I think voters in the city just want authenticity. Just be authentic. Yes. And Chewy now has a chance to do that. I don't know if Rahm can make up for what he's done, but remember Chicagoland, the series where he was getting in and out of SUVs and people thought this was going to be a big commercial for Rahm Emanuel? I thought it showed him to be out of touch, awkward, arrogant, and I don't know that you can undo all of that.
That was my point in the last segment. Is I don't know how you move people to come out and vote in April if you haven't. Part of it is weather. Part of it is weather. But
the main thing is a solution to the city's catastrophic financial situation. Do you understand how close we are to bankruptcy, not paying the bills?
All the people that care about that voted Tuesday. The 66%. Wait a minute, but the 66% didn't care about that, Dan. I'm just saying is that the 66% are not going to be moved by issues. They're moved by whether you like the person or not. Back shortly from Chicago. Bruce DuMont back on Beyond the Beltway, a recorded edition of our broadcast this evening, talking to our Chicago audience about the race for mayor coming up in April, and also there's going to be some ward runoffs. We're going to talk about those 19 races in just a little bit, but let's have our guests introduce themselves. And first of all, let me say to our first guest, who's going to introduce himself, thank you very much for sitting in here for the last 6 weeks while I was away and bringing everybody up to date every single Sunday night on what's happening in the race for mayor and the aldermanic races.
It was 7 weeks, by the way. And it was an honor, Bruce. You know it was. I remember being on Inside Politics when we were down on LaSalle and Adams at the top. Anyway, Dan Miller, I'm co-founder of Chicago Innovation Awards. This is a program that casts a bright light on innovators in Chicago, connecting, educating, and bringing them together to share information.
Carlos Ponce, and you're not related to any of the Ponce family.
I like to think that I'm one of the original Ponces in Chicago. Bruce, I've been in public service most of my life. For the past year, I am co-founder of ID Surety. We're a technology startup that is looking as to how you use identity authentication in commercial and governmental transactions, and we're targeting principally the undocumented and what I call the underdocumented community.
Okay, very good. Richard Boykin.
Bruce, let me thank you for allowing me to be on the show again. Richard Boykin, Cook County Commissioner, District 1, representing the west side of Chicago and western suburbs, concerned about mental health and expansion of mental health services for the state of Illinois, criminal justice reform, among other things.
I'm
Krista
McQuarrie, a member of the Tribune editorial board, so I write editorials that reflect the position of the paper and write an occasional column, mostly on politics.
How many debates do you think we're going to have?
I hope we have.
Rahm is going to want more debates now, right? Or do you think he's going to want fewer debates?
I was surprised that he consented to as many as he had, and
So
I'm
did I.
convinced
But
that
we
he did
knew
that
he
to
was
show
losing.
how weak the field was. Well,
No.
that was a surprise.
The only time you can consent to that many debates is when you're losing. As
But
an
he did,
incumbent,
and
he
think
knew
he knew
he was losing. Yes, his
Oh.
polling was showing that he was down. And when Willie Wilson started spending that money on ads, it really drove the mayor's numbers
One
down.
of the other pictures that I can never get out of my mind when I was watching Rahm with his comments on election night was looking behind him, and on one side there was Susana Mendoza, on the other side there was Luis Gutierrez, two major leaders of the Hispanic community, and all I could see by their eyes was, oh my God, my career may be passing right before my eyes because we're on the wrong team here. How much, and again, their wards didn't support the mayor at all. What does it say about their future and their inability to have much sway in this race, Carlos?
I personally don't believe that long term it's going to affect them overall negatively in terms of their positions. But
Well,
nevertheless,
she's been reelected.
she's been reelected.
She was unopposed.
The congressman
That's a good way to run.
is a national leader on the immigration movement. I think that there'll be a reconciliation with Chewy no matter what happens. But Chewy has changed the game in Hispanic politics in Chicago, it will never be the same because he's going to inspire Hispanic participation at levels that you haven't seen before.
Do you agree with that, Richard?
Look, I think.
And how do you see those two careers? Because then I'm going to ask you about some other people.
Look, I think leadership is always being where your community is in leading the community. So I think that there may be some repercussions, and I am hopeful that Commissioner Garcia will win this race because I think it's a great opportunity for Hispanic voters and Hispanic
If he did, do you think there'd be a
country.
challenge to Congressman Gutierrez?
Absolutely.
I agree. That will happen. Now, the other person that people are interested in knowing about is County Commission President Toni Preckwinkle. There was pressure on her to run. She chose not to run. Do you think she regrets not running?
Boy, I would guess so, Bruce. She could have walked away with this race as we see it unfold. Now she's got to be looking at Garcia, a likely candidate who's got a good chance to become mayor, and he's not going to be mayor for just 4 years. He'll be mayor for at least 8 years. And then Toni Preckwinkle looks back on her career and sees 8 years disappear out of it. To spend it at the county board, she's far too talented to spend just
Well,
there.
now, wait a
With all-
minute.
I'm
Now,
sorry,
wait a
Richard. I
minute.
didn't mean to be disrespectful. but
County
she,
government.
No, but then Richard, then somebody else can move up.
crime and hospitals, Richard. That's all you got to work with.
No, you got the forest preserve, and you got
forest
you got a
preserve,
whole
forget.
lot of things to work with.
All right.
You
The
think,
county
you
is
think
the
she
second
regret? You
largest
think she
government.
regrets doing that?
I don't, actually, because I think she was smart enough to know that she could have given him a real run for the money. And I think a couple of things. One, there are a lot of problems at county government that I think she sincerely really wants to finish work on. Two, she's never really been vetted. And I think there was a little bit of fear over the power of Rahm Emanuel and what he could do to kind of ruin this nice reputation that she has.
divorce you're
And-
referring to?
No, actually,
No?
just the way county there are some issues with Medicaid and the hospital system, and county board doesn't get the kind of scrutiny that it used to get under Todd Stroger. So I think she was a little weak there, and I just don't think she had the fire in the belly.
Carlos?
It's hard to pass up on the mayor. I mean, you're going to dream about it. You're going to think about it. I think
She
she
was
would probably guess
consistent,
it a
though.
little
All
bit.
along, she
But
was
it-
consistent that she was not.
But there's
gonna run.
again, not that endorsements mean that much like they used to. But again, it's always better
Excuse
to have
me.
them than not. No. I don't mean. I don't.
today,
No.
Bruce.
I don't. Wait a minute. I didn't say newspaper endorsements. I was talking about political endorsements. You had. Well, obviously, that didn't help. You know what? No. Wait a minute.
You're
Wait a
heading
minute.
all
No,
over.
I'm not going to dig my hole. No, I'm gonna say what I'm going to finish what I started to say, and that is I was talking about political endorsements. The fact that the congressman and Susana Mendoza were for Rahm Emanuel, and they didn't even carry their own wards. I mean, there's something to be said for that. And talking about their future. And again, what happens is, when you don't, politicians remember when they're in a tough fight, and this was a tough fight. You remember those that are with you early. There's a thing in politics called early money.
Absolutely.
Politicians remember early money. They remember early support. So there may be a variety of people that are jumping on that Chewy bandwagon right now because they think it's going to be close, or they're reading some of the things that others are saying that it could be a race, or they want to be on both sides. That's generally what happens. And I'm just thinking about the people that, it could have been me. It could have been me. And I'm also looking at that about the relations as how are things going to be at the statewide level. What's going to happen? What's going to happen to a politician who may have county or statewide aspirations, and let's say they're Caucasian? Do they want to infuriate the Hispanic community at this particular time? I would think
Absolutely not.
I would think it increases the likelihood of Chuy Garcia. And again, we should mention, I mean, he's very well liked. I mean, he's a personable guy. There's probably a lot of people who sat out the race, or the ones that were for Rahm stay for Rahm. But the ones that may have sat out the race, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if you see some unconventional, movement to Chuy Garcia. And who else is Rahm going to bring in? I mean, the president's not coming back. I mean, boy, talk.
I've actually heard that
You're
the
kidding.
library is going to be the next rollout. I'm not suggesting that it will move voters, but
Yeah.
they're going to announce the Obama Presidential Library somewhere on the South Side to, give him
Okay.
a little more connection with the black community.
Okay,
that
but not
will annoy
necessarily.
so many people as well. the
Say
selection
again?
of that will annoy as many people are going to be not as many, but that'll annoy a lot of people because it's going to be on former Park District
I
property.
don't think people care at this
Oh
point.
Yeah,
man!
I know they don't.
But here's,
but I
but here's
think
someone else.
people-
Here's someone else that you're talking about 2016. I don't think you're going to see Bill Clinton. I want to find out where Hillary Clinton comes down. Hillary Clinton is not going to want to get involved in this race. She can't do anything that's going to tick off the Hispanic community for 2016. So I don't think Rahm is going to be able to pull the bell.
They can't
and get
help him. They can't help him.
He's,
I mean,
no,
he has to do this on
himself.
his own. I think Chicago voters have shown that they're not going to be impressed with Obama. They're not going to be impressed with Hillary. This is up to Rahm for the next
Right.
6 weeks to prove why he is the best person for the job.
It's a neighborhood fight. It's going to be neighborhood.
And
to
when there's a
And he
neighborhood
doesn't-
fight, that brings us to the subject of the 19 runoffs. There's going to be 19 runoffs. It's the most since 1947. First time there's ever been a runoff for mayor. But let's take a look at some of those wards where things are up. First of all, and some of these involve non-incumbents. But again, which means the incumbent is retired, and it's the top two vote getters. But in the 2nd and the 7th and the 10th and the 11th and the 15th and the 16th and the 18th ward, there are going to be runoffs there. And in that group, I would say the one that surprises me most is the 11th ward. This is Patrick Daley Thompson not being able to win in the 11th ward, missing by, a little less than 55 votes. I mean, was that the biggest surprise from the aldermanic runoffs?
It was one of them. Ray Cologne losing
Yeah,
outright was
big
another
time.
big one. But
Huge.
yes, I mean, Patrick Daley Thompson is losing in Bridgeport
Right.
against a kid who's about 27 years old and is the president of the Little League.
Yeah.
So that was a big surprise.
Also, going to the races in the 20s. Let's take a look at some of those. These are runoffs. Incumbent Willie Cochran is running in the 20th. Incumbent Howard Brookins in the 21st. Michael Scott in 24, and Deborah Graham on the far west side. That's your old stomping grounds. That's Danny Davis's old ward. And again, what happened to Deborah Graham? Couldn't get to 50%.
Well, I think she almost got to 50. It wasn't that close. Obviously it's going to be a bloodbath. I think the interesting thing about that race is that Congressman Danny Davis and former Alderman Ike Carruthers are supporting Chris Talaferro in that race. I think the other races in my area in the 1st District are the 37th.
We're going to move out. We're going to move to the 30s when we come back. Again, thank you very much for joining us. This is a recorded edition of our program, so we're talking about just Chicago politics. And I should mention that if you're longtime viewers of this program, I want to give you a little tip on our radio home. We have a brand new radio home. It's WCGO. It's AM 1590. So if you're used to listening to the broadcast every Sunday night from 6 to 8 o'clock, it is no longer on the station it was once on. It is on a new station. It's WCGO, AM 1590. Ironically, 1590 AM in Evanston, Chicago. It's where I began my radio career in May of 1973. So I'm going back home again, back shortly. Really funny.
Surprise.
So
Sorry.
we're
Except for
so
the mayor,
the streak
I think I'm
continues.
gonna endorse
Anyway,
you.
we're back. Anyway,
Yeah.
talking to Dan Miller about about being on WCGO this tonight, earlier tonight. It keeps my my uninterrupted consecutive record because I went on the air in May of 1973, and I've been on the air uninterrupted on some Chicago station for 42 years. And when I got bounced from LS, I said, "Oh well, I mean the streak is broken." And it was actually during the show last week. If you listened to the show or watched it, we were doing a live stream. You heard me commiserating because I got the job offer to go to WCGO when I was still doing the show last Sunday night on the radio. So that's the way it is.
So this is like the Joe DiMaggio of radio?
Yeah, well, I don't know about that, but I don't know. Well, let's put it this way. I don't know whether it's been 42 years of hits, but I've at least shown up to take a swing at the bat.
Oh,
Anyway,
90% of success.
let's look at perspiration. What perspiration over?
No,
what's the-
90% of success is showing up.
Oh, that's right. Isn't there something about perspiration as well?
That was Einstein.
Einstein, whatever. Okay, let's talk about. Let's look at some of the other words again. 19 runoffs. Looking in the 35th or in the 30s, the incumbent Ray Suarez. is against the challenger Millie Santiago, and again Deborah Mill also I think a surprise. The 36th ward and also 37 Emma Mitch. She's been around a long time, and again, let's spend a moment just talking about Deb Mill. I mean, you have the Thompson Daly people not winning enough, getting enough votes in the 11th ward, and you have a name by the name of Mel not getting enough in the 33rd. That's another big surprise.
It was a big upset. In fact, she was creeping above 50%, and then she started to slip as more precincts came in. I mean, this was CTU's race. She is running against Tim Megan, who is a CTU member. This is organized labor coming out strong for him, and it says something. Same with Emma Mitch. She's running against Tara Stamps. Tara Stamps, one of the most impressive candidates we interviewed at the Tribune for endorsement purposes, Chicago Public Schools teacher. So these are examples of CTU really showing its muscle.
Let's take a look at the 40s. I'm sorry, Carlos.
I was about to say, I thought it was interesting that Deborah Mel was scrubbing her website and her material of any ROM mentions.
Oh, really?
In her ward because it was not polling well for her.
Right. Let's take a look at the wards with 40, and it's Mary O'Connor in the 41st ward, Michelle Smith in the 43rd, John Arena up in 45. That was one where the CTU was very much involved in that race, and James Kappelman in the 46th ward.
Bruce, that 45th ward with Arena, he is everything the CTU wanted. I think this shows a weakness, or at least that the CTU is not unbeatable. Anyway, a CTU on he's with the CTU on schools, and he's against charter schools. He's in favor of all the progressive agenda and all that kind of stuff.
But it's a more conservative ward. Historically, the 45th ward is a more conservative ward.
But he's in a runoff,
right,
in spite of the CTU, and he's in a runoff against a policeman,
right,
which I think,
Gardino.
I think that sounds pretty interesting, too. I don't know what that.
I think I was most surprised by Kappelman
Yeah.
because Amy Crawford she's a really smart attorney. This is the Uptown area. Nobody heard of her, and Rahm gave money to Kappelman. He was on that list of Chicago Forward recipients to try to kind of get him over the finish line, and now he's in a runoff.
But the people who got money for Chicago Forward, which is Rahm's group.
It's not Rahm's group.
Well,
it's only fair. It's the Political Action Committee that's not that is.
That's right. There's no connection between the two.
They never communicate.
They never communicate.
It's not
they
run by
coincidentally,
Rahm's top lieutenant Becky Carroll.
They just coincidentally, if you ran into them at a bar, they would agree with a lot of things.
Right.
Anyway,
Continue,
I would thank you very much. I withdraw that statement. What I'm saying is that the amount of money that this group put into people who would be supportive of Rahm in the city council, how much are those people going to get now? Because Rahm needs more money. I mean, he's not going to be throwing much money around in these. Or am I wrong? Am I thinking wrong on this?
I think he will because he needs as many allies as he can have, and he's not going to
need them if he doesn't get elected.
And he's going to hope that those folks in those wards look. It's a neighborhood race now.
Yeah.
He's going to hope that those folks in those wards can run strong, and if they run strong, that they can bring people to the polls for him at the same time.
How does take me, because you've had this discussion, I'm sure, during your political career, and if anybody else weighs in, I'd go ahead. What happens when you are an also-ran in a race? Let's say, like Willie Wilson. I mean, he finished third. What's being said? I mean, does he give Rahm an opportunity to talk with him?
Absolutely.
Does he talk to Chewy? I mean, is it about money? What happens to to the other people? I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to go after Doc Walls, but I mean, what happens to the rest of that field? I mean, I can't imagine any of them supporting Rahm.
Yeah, I can't imagine that either. But I think each and every one of them will talk to him, including Doc Walls. Look. He got votes too. I mean, if Doc Walls came out in support of Mayor Emanuel, you would think that the voters who voted for him would actually vote for Rahm Emanuel. I mean, based on Doc Walls, and people will think that there was a deal that was made.
But Fioretti can't say that. Fioretti couldn't say that.
I still think, so this is a number that none of us know, but there were a large portion of voters all over the city. If you look where Chewy did well on the northwest side in white wards that used to
Yes.
be Rahm's territory, southwest side wards that used to be Rahm's territory. And again, I think some of them were just sending him a warning signal, sending him a message that he's got to prove himself, but they will eventually come back to Rahm.
Okay, well, I mean, I think the northwest side and the southwest side. In this particular case, it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, it's always going to be about turnout. It always is. There's nothing new about that. But again, we're going to have a lot more to talk about. And I also tell you that, I mean, for the next several weeks, periodically, we will be doing a live local show, or not live, but we'll be doing a show specifically for Chicago television, specifically on these races. And again, Dan Miller, we thank you very much for sitting in for me, and you'll be part of those discussions. Richard Boykin, County Commissioner, thank you very much. Carlos Ponce, thanks very much for being with us, and Christian McCurry, editorial board member of the Chicago Tribune. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thank you very much for joining us on this special edition of Beyond the Beltway. We'll be back next week. So long. Good night.
My prediction,
Yes,
if there's a black-brown coalition,